So for the audience and panel members, what we are doing is a panel discussion on propagation. We have 3 folks here who all do a lot of propagation, and they'll be talking about the approaches and techniques they use. My role is mostly to make sure people's questions are being answered. If you ask a question, I'll be repeating the question because often the person on the panel can't hear it, especially from the back row. Is that better? Okay. And we are videotaping, so especially this meeting, if you could try to make sure to keep the side conversations down, that would be awesome. Thanks. Paul, do you want to get started?
I hadn't planned on beginning. I don't.
Well, you sat there, so you got it.
Alyssa.
All right, Alyssa, you get to go first.
Oh, I didn't escape by sitting down here.
She's gonna do C.
There you go. Okay, so.
Okay, so I'm going to do seed, apparently. So I propagate a handful of ways primarily. Seed is a more recent way that I have begun doing so, but probably the manner in which I am most prolific because, as you might know if you have seen cactus seeds, they aren't super big. Cacti do not grow very fast, so you can fit a bunch in a very small pot for a while. So when I was initially pursuing the whole from seed approach, I know I personally found it very overwhelming because there are so many methods and it seems like you have to be so exact and you have to have this substrate and sterilize at that temperature for this time and everybody needs this temperature at night and it'll just die 100 deaths if it's too cold in the day. And I did it anyway, thinking, of course, nothing would take. My first round did not. All my mesons died. Don't cut your eye teeth growing mesons. But I am very happy to say that since then, the other seeds I've sown, a mix of Astrophytum, Conophytum, Aztecium, a few Trichocereus, Myrtilocacti, etc., have taken really well. And the thing I've taken away from that is there's a few pieces that you need to make seed happen. A substrate blend, and I've used basically the same one for everything. For me, it's equal parts coir, coarse sand, succulent soil, pumice, and zeolite, which you can just find in a bucket. At Home Depot, it's a 25-pound bucket. I mix that up. I put it in some nice square pots and I bottom water. And then once that's damped, I run it all through the microwave for about 4 minutes. It's not the most sciencey way of sterilizing things, but so far it's been pretty effective at addressing what so many folks say, oh, well, I'm really worried, stuff will grow that I don't want to grow when I'm trying to grow from seed. So from there, I let things cool down and I just sprinkle or place the seeds in the pot. Most of them will wind up going on a heating mat unless they have articulated different needs like the Conophytum that just sort of sit on a fall windowsill and get ignored for a long time while they grow. And overall, that approach has worked really well. I haven't needed to track down any really strange ingredients. And even if you didn't have commercial lights, if you had a heating mat, you could probably go out and manage this today. So does anybody have questions about seeds? I forgot I had pictures. I'm just bad at this. Yeah, let's go to pictures. Roll pictures. So that's what I do. Thank you. Well, you're much better at this than I am. So that's what I was talking about. Those pots have been filled. They've been bottom watered until you can tell that they're very damp. They've been microwaved and they've been cooled. So just sitting out, getting from temperature. And at that point, I try to be a little bit fastidious and I try to clean my tools, as you can see right there, with a little bit of alcohol just in case. I honestly don't think it makes that big of a difference. It's probably just my own idiosyncrasy in this approach. And then we'll place the seeds. That coarse sand that you see on the left side is the top dressing that I use for the majority of my seeds. I found that it provides a little bit of scaffolding as the seedling is coming up to kind of support it on either side, although there are some, like Echeveria seeds are so tiny, and when they initially sprout, they're just so small that if there's anything on them like that sand, it doesn't really work. Yeah. And so this is kind of what it looks like. And we can go to the next slide. Yes. So it's a good thing there are photos because I forgot one of the interesting pieces of germination. So most seeds and seedlings like to be damp. And even though later in their lives that's not quite the case for many cacti, they like it in the beginning. So doing this little baggy approach, which actually has a fancy name, and it's somebody's last name, and it's so-and-so's approach that I have forgotten, is a fairly common and popular technique for creating like a little mini greenhouse. And then as things are ready, you can open up the Ziploc portion a little bit and start to harden them off. You can also just leave them in there, in some cases for like a couple years even, which is pretty neat. So we can go to the next slide. And so you can sort of see the bottom shelf is an example of what some of it looks like. And so on the left-hand side, you can see a combination of those awesome little seedlings kind of just hanging out in their mini greenhouses, and some that have graduated to open air. And fun little tidbit on the right-hand side, that big tray full of ferrocacti seedlings, which is just another way of saying basically barrel cacti. My partner and I harvested those seeds when we were in Arizona for the holidays. So from an approved source, friends lawn, essentially. No photos. We can go to the next slide. Just a close-up, because they're really pretty. That's it. And the next slide. So we have some more seedlings. These are astrophytum. The funky colored ones are variegated, come along quite nicely actually. Sown at the end of the summer, so doing well. And we can go on to the next slide. And for those of you who were here for the talk in, I believe it was October, you know, there was a mention of this particular variety, very strange variety of astrophytum that has the sort of medusoid approach of these long fingers coming out. That's what these are. So if you remember that from the talk, that's what these seedlings are. So I think that's the end of my photos.
Did you sew them in lines?
I placed them one by one. Yes. It took a long time because there's about 2,000 astrophytum seeds. Not all the ones.
Melissa, is that the tray that you put down in the middle?
So the tray in the middle, yes, thank you for reminding me that it's there. Out of sight, out of mind, as the saying goes. So there's a tray, a white tray right in the middle of those tables, and you'll see a few different examples of seedlings, including this pot actually, and then not the variegated astrophytum, but an example of astrophytum. They might be B-type, it'll say on the little tag, and there's also examples of some seedlings, Dioscorea, conophytum. I think I have some Echeveria laui in there, and the rest, I guess your eyes will tell you because my memory has forgotten them. But they're there for you to take a peek at to see what they look like.
Do you water from the top or the bottom?
At the beginning, I water from the bottom. And for the most part, because they're in their domes, like you can see in the middle right there, a number of them stay in there for quite a while. What I'll do is I'll continue bottom watering and allowing the sort of just ambient humidity to soak through the top. Once they are old enough to be outside, so you see like the ones on the left, I'll go ahead and start top watering. And what I'll do is, especially when they're young and they can tolerate it, every other bottom watering for the big tray or just top watering for the ones on the left, I'll go ahead and use a water that has a little bit of cactus fertilizer in there. And so far they've taken very well to that.
Is timing critical? Can you start seeds anytime, or do you need to do it in the early part of the year?
So this is a really, really good question, and this is one of those things that I was tearing my hair out trying to figure out when I spent all summer reading far too many forums and comments, and I don't have a perfect answer for you. What I have taken away from my own experience and then sort of experience by proxy with reading is that there are some varieties where, yes, it's going to matter greatly. I have not personally encountered those that seem so contingent upon very specific timing that they just unilaterally will fail. Having said that, the ones I've sown by luck and a tiny bit of design, I've happened to sow at the times when you're supposed, air quotes, supposed to sow them. So it could just be that I lucked out, and it happens that, yes, timing is super important, I just happen to get it right. But having said that, what I have read is that if you understand the conditions that a particular species would need, if you have the tools to replicate it, you should be okay. But take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I hope that was helpful. It's a very hard question to answer. I know, I'm still trying to answer it.
Hi. At what point do you take the cover off?
So it depends on the variety. So I have some that are in their little greenhouses, some Aztecian that I sowed, and I'm not going to open them for like 2 or 3 years. I'm just going to leave them in there. Yeah. The Astrophytum, for example, all the sources that I found who know and love what they're doing with them, they go ahead and they keep them in there 8 to 12 months even, and they take very well to that. I think besides the ones that have very specific, do not keep these in humidity for too long, you can pretty much just take a look and see, are they doing well? Are they getting, green fuzz on top? Are they getting a little moldy? Ooh, did one just rot? And you can sort of play it by ear, but in general I found there's no hard and fast rule, and they are all just fairly easygoing when it comes to either being in or out. I personally favor keeping them in a little bit more because they grow a little bit faster, it seems to me.
We have another question in the back?
I fell into growing from seed by walk, not anything like on a scale that you're doing. But I found, those little tiny solo cups that sometimes they put ketchup and mustard in, or salad dressing, and you take out awesome little seed containers.
Oh, cool, that is good to know. Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out what to keep my seeds in.
Some of them seal better than others, but regardless of the size of the receptacle, whether it's a pork cup or a salad dressing cup or whatever, but they're short. So you can stick them like right under the lights, close to the lights. Don't let it touch the bowl so it fries them. But so they get the heat from the light itself. And you're right, they stay there forever. I've got some 3-year-old seedlings that are maybe the size of my thumbnail. And they're under the lights. I really should leave them into the sun. But I mean, they are really nicely forgiving. And I cannot believe how much snow we've got there. That is really
I have a bad habit when
honest to God. You could repopulate the Sonora Desert.
And since we were on a recycling kick before, Keurig cups are also good for seed starters. You can punch extra holes in the bottom, and they're about the same size as those salad dressing side dish things. Sierra?
How would you recommend sterilizing soil if you don't have a microwave?
Okay, the question was, if you don't have a microwave, what's a way to sterilize the soil?
Sure. So you can do it in the oven, understanding that the word sterilize isn't totally accurate for what we're describing by my approach. We're in the oven. That's okay. We get what we're saying. But you can run it through the oven. I believe it's at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. So you mix up your substrate that you'd like to use. You put it on a pan, and you go ahead and you just bake it. And then you let it cool, and you can transfer it over into your container, whatever you're growing in.
Where do you get these white trays in the domes?
What was your source of the trays with the domes?
Sure, so the trays are called 10-20 trays, which is a common term referring to like a size of tray. These particular trays are from Bootstrap Farmer. I absolutely love them, both the company and the trays. They are very heavy duty, so they are not flimsy at all. They come in black and white, and I believe they have smaller ones in colors, and you can have options to have little slots in the bottom to allow drainage, and they do make what is called a 10-10 tray, which is half the size of a 10-20 like it sounds, and you can nest those successfully in the tray. So you could have, for example, 2 10-10s in a 10-20 with, whatever you're growing in there. The domes, I did not purchase from them. I don't know if they have them. They very well might and probably do. I purchased those from Amazon.
You can get them in even Walmart or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to go into something that big, how about this?
Yeah.
open that up. Cut the bottom part out.
Stand up, will you?
I'm sorry?
Stand up, can't see you.
Sorry. Try not to cut myself. But this is what I use when I have just a few that I want to raise.
Food checkout works really well.
I'm sorry?
Food checkout works.
Oh, yeah, well, there are all kinds of them, like, in the
Tupperware.
deli departments, they have those plastic tall containers for olives or whatever, and they're perfect, wash them out, especially the ones that don't have the terrible stick-on labels that won't come out. But what you do with these, I've found, I can't get it, of course, out, you know, but the top becomes the bottom to collect water, to water from the bottom. And there, okay? And what you can do is just get an old coat hanger, wire coat hanger, with a candle, heat the coat hanger end up and poke holes in the bottom. You now have drainage for them. Put it in here. You don't need the drainage, that's going to collect the water, or you can water from the bottom by just lifting the whole thing up. And there's your top. All of $2 or $3, and you don't throw out the plastic, obviously. And a lot of this is great for real tiny seeds I found, especially stuff like lithops and conophytums and echemerias where the seeds are just like dust. So you probably, one little packet of seed would fit in 1 or 2 cells, and you could put another type in one of the other cells, so you have a whole collection of them that you can either keep on your windowsill. To start them off, what I usually do is put them on the top of the refrigerator at the back, where the heat rising from the compressor warms them up just enough. And once they've sprouted, then you can put them in a window somewhere or under lights. So cheap, quick, and I would say very available. Yes?
The seeds are really dust-like. Do you mix those with sand?
Everyone has their own thing. I find
What was
it.
the question?
The question,
Oh, I'm sorry.
The question was, the seeds are so tiny, can you mix them with sand?
You can do that, but what I found is putting, using whatever you want for a soil mix in the bottom, then putting a layer of crushed perlite on top of it. And now as the seeds, you sow the seeds on top of that, and as they're starting to germinate, now you can see these little tiny, ultra tiny little green dots, and keep an eye on what's growing in it, because if it's just soil, you really have to go looking to see what's germinating. Okay?
There are some examples of seeds actually on the table near the white tray that's there. It's next to a little card that says, what do cacti and succulent seeds look like? So I have a few there for you to take a look at.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what was all the stuff on the top shelf? Did you grow it from seed? And
Oh.
How many lights are in the fixtures?
So the stuff up top, I did not grow from seed. That's all the other form of propagation that we'll probably get to very, very shortly. Cuttings and leaf propagation. So that's how I grew most of those, and they're just for the events that we do. My partner and I own a little plant business, so yeah. And the full scope is, so there's one more shelf above that, and then there's 3 total of the 3 shelves, so it's a 3 by 3 on one wall of lights and shelves, and then on the other side of the room, there's a little grow table that has 3 across and 3 on the bottom.
So you've got three fixtures on each shelf? There's like half a dozen lights?
So there's 1 light on each shelf, so like 1, 2, 3.
Two tubes?
I'd remind you that those shelving units are 4 feet wide, the exact same width of the grow lights, correct?
I'm not yet.
I can probably answer this question better.
Yeah, this is my partner.
Melissa's partner.
The group lights.
Built the system. So that it's a flat LED panel. So it's not a fluorescent tube. It's like a
Oh, they are?
it's a LED panel that's like, I don't know, 10 millimeters, thick. It's just a little thing that's stuck to the bottom of the other one.
So it's a special setup, it's not your...
You can do it with fluorescent tubes. It would work just fine. But I like the LED lights better because they put out a little bit less heat and are a little bit more energy efficient. It's they're more expensive. Each one of those things. The LED panel that goes on there is like $60 or something, but they put out a lot of light and they don't put out a lot of heat. I mean, they also have a footprint of, like half a centimeter or so.
Do they have the correct wavelength?
Yeah, they're full spectrum lights. The ones that I found that I like the best are from a company called Horticultural Lighting Group, and they just make high quality LED panels for greenhouses.
Somebody else?
So the tube lighting, I've bought things that said, that they were full spectrum, and I didn't feel like they didn't look like they full spectrum that I've used in the past. Do you have a, should I be asking you?
Yes, definitely. Direct all like questions to.
So,
okay.
So is there a specific brand or something that specifically plant lights?
I mean, usually it will say in the branding, if you're getting stuff from Amazon, the quality control is probably not utmost, and they can just say that they're grow lights, and when they have a very limited spectral range, and actually measuring the spectral range is not easy to do. They sell like apps for your phone, but I don't know how much I would trust them. So for LED lights, like LED Light Depot is a website that has a lot of really good LED lights. For fluorescent tubes, since we don't have any, I don't really know, but I can find a brand that I would trust that are nice, full spectrum fluorescent tubes. But I would, anything, trust your gut, and if it says that it's full spectrum and looks full spectrum, it's probably fine.
Okay. So and how far away? You start them real close?
When they're seeds?
Yeah. Well,
So I actually don't give them a ton of light when they're first starting because they're so fragile and they're these new things that are not used to the sun. So by and large, if we can go back to the screen that shows the photo that shows the grow setup. So that lower level is set to the bare minimum, the lowest that these lights can emit. And some of the plants don't even start there, like the conophytum, which are shown in the little tray over there. I just started by the windowsill. So initially they'll be exactly where you see them, right there. If I start them under the lights, that's the height that they're going to be at, or they'll just be on a windowsill. I don't elevate them or raise them up, or at least have not done so yet.
So what is that height there?
That is a good question.
Couple feet?
14 inches.
What is it?
14 inches.
Is it 14 inches? Okay, the expert has spoken. They are approximately 14 inches away from the light.
Okay, we don't have any more seed questions, so we'll move on to Art. You were
I
going
have
to do
one
seed, got it.
Where do you source your seed from?
Oh, it's a very long list. So everybody, or a lot of folks, probably have heard of Mesa Gardens, and they're in the US. I'm very fond of, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, Cory's cactine. They are located in Germany and they can provide a phyto for what you're bringing in. They have a phenomenal selection of everything from like Pseudolithos and Aztechium to, Echeveria laui, and then all the common ones that you're thinking of. Cape Succulent seeds, something like that. They're out of South Africa and they work with a few others, including Mezen Seed Shop. They're both really good. Silver Hill seeds I've heard bandied about by quite a few people, although I have never personally purchased from them. There's also rareplant.me and unusualseeds.net perhaps, or .com. If you search unusual seeds, you'll find them. So a number of sources like that, and then tracking down people who can provide seeds, ethically and whatnot.
And don't forget Mesa Gardens.
Yeah, so the first.
Oh, I'm sorry, and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the Cactus and Succulent Society has a seed bank. And,
Oh, that's right, yes.
And our club also has a seed bank, which Art is showing you right now.
Some of the seeds in here were originally bought by Dan Downey and myself when we were in South Africa, visited Silver Hill Seeds back in 2010. And a lot of people might feel that, well, if the seeds are that old, they're not viable any longer. Not the case. a friend recently told me about some seeds that she had written about, which were date palm seeds that were found, I believe, in Israel. They were dated, carbon dated to over 2,000 years old. And guess what? They're growing. So we have a huge selection of seeds here. The price is very reasonable, free. Can't get cheaper than free. So if they don't germinate well, the price was very reasonable. You can try others. The guy who's been handling this for several years now, unfortunately, Will Kimmerer, lives down in Connecticut 5 days a week and in Reading, Mass, which is a 3.5-hour ride. And the bottom line is he just can't get to the meetings any longer because of the rides. So perhaps Alyssa just might be borrowing the seed bank for a while. I will tell you that it's almost impossible here to divvy up the seeds because some of them literally are like dust. So if you put an order in, go through this, we'll get you seeds one way or the other at the next meeting, okay? And generally it's 5 seeds that you get and the price is free, okay?
So that was my question, how do members look at the book and get seeds?
It's available here during the meetings, and if you see something that you want, if they're larger seeds, that's no problem, but many of them, again, especially the mesem seeds, are dust-like. I sent out some seeds or gave some seeds once to a member who opened it up and said there was nothing in there and dumped the envelope. There are seeds we send, but the problem is we have to do it under a microscope. The seeds are that tiny. So if you get a package of seeds at the next meeting, and they're mesem seeds or what's the other ones? Echeveria is a dust-like also.
There's an example of the Echeveria over there, you'll
Yeah.
see.
So, but again, it's definitely worth a try. It's a lot of fun. Okay?
Okay, well, we get ready to move
I just wanted to make one comment too, and as one of the older members, I guess, of our club, and watching us age in this hobby, I must say it's nice to know our hobby is in good hands. People like Elizabeth.
I've just been asked to remind folks we are taping this presentation, so if you could just pause a second so I can repeat the question, or else the question itself doesn't make it to the tape, which kind of makes the answer a little disjointed. So, Art, you're on a roll. Do you want to
Okay,
vegetative?
we're going to need the shades pulled up and the lights on because I don't have any slides, right? It's just, this is the only one.
Slides, that's it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am not a techie. I'm a dirt with a nails grow.
Lights?
Lights?
There you go.
So, yeah, call me when I need help. Let's see if we can find the stuff. It's kind of helter-skelter here, so I'm going to try to go from cuttings. One of the things that I found, first of all, getting here with plants is very difficult at this time of the year. I needed help this morning. It was about 5 below zero in New Hampshire with this much ice that had been trampled upon before it froze. And it was quite an event trying to get here. So this is why it's mostly small stuff. And the stuff that I had that I was going to take with me, I guess it was just too far down to my driveway, to my car. So this is the one large plant I brought along. Does anyone know what this is? The euphorbia trigona. This is probably the most popular euphorbia anywhere, mainly because this was this tall last November, and it's growing almost on a daily basis. And you can't really kill it. And a lot of people end up having one of these 6-footers, 8-footers. Now what do I do with it? They send me emails like, what do I do with it? Cut it down and dump whatever is at the bottom and make new cuttings from the top. But literally, it's very, very easy. I'll get a watch. It better not squirt on me now.
Why aren't you wearing gloves?
Why am I not wearing gloves? Yeah, because if you hold it in between the ridges, you don't need them. Normally, I would have. Yes, you want to taste it? Being a euphorbia, it does have its little idiosyncrasy is that it's got this white sap. And the white sap on most euphorbias is pretty innocuous. It's not dangerous at all. There are a couple of them where if your neighbors are bothering you and you want to get your bow and arrow out, put the tips on some of them, they work very nicely. Your neighbors stop very quickly. But otherwise, what I suggest that you do, right, is to wash the end off. You can either dip it in water or just have a little bottle of spray. Let any cuttings that you make callus over. And it doesn't matter what the plant is. If it's a succulent, it doesn't need to go immediately into the soil or to whatever medium that you want to put it into. So what I would suggest when you're doing this is to rinse it off, have a spray bottle, or just dip it in water, and that'll get rid of the white sap. If you get any of the sap on your fingers, wash them off immediately, because an hour later, if you've done one of these and then do one of these, or make a visit somewhere, you will soon find out that you didn't wash your hands well enough. So, and we do, those of us who are playing with this stuff have learned the hard way of washing your hands immediately after. Again, it's just an irritant, but it can hurt badly, especially in your eyes, okay? So after a week or so, sitting either on a windowsill or anywhere in the house, put it in some sort of a soil mixture, just about any kind of soil mixture, and it'll root. And it's basically the same with most of the stem succulents. Some of them are easier than others. This one is also a euphorbia. Oh, great. I'm supposed to guess what it is, right? Yeah.
Only in particular, but to show the cuttings, I have wire benches.
Yeah.
And I just stick it through the bench and let it dry out, and you can see it's 3 weeks old.
So if you can't see it unless you get really up close. This was just sitting on the wire bench, and already it's starting to throw out roots from the cutting, which is amazing. So this thing is already on its way by doing nothing but just cutting it. Thank you,
Stick it in the holes in the bench.
Yeah. Sticking it in the holes in the bench, let the air dry it out, and immediately the plant will start to grow. This is a euphorbia relative from Central Africa, Synodinium grantii, variety rubra. We got this, it was torn up at the ground from UNH greenhouses last summer, and it's amazing. Take the cuttings, let them dry for 2 days. A week, the leaves immediately start to droop. Put it in soil, water it after a week or so, and it's almost instant. Within 2 or 3 days, it's already starting to root very quickly during the growing season, obviously. That's one of the things that you should remember when you're doing cuttings, is to make sure that the plant is not dormant. Because generally, if the plants are dormant, it's going to take months for them to slowly recover and start to throw out roots. Let me see, we've got offsets and divisions. Paul, I'm going to do your little thing. You can show them this now.
I get to make the mess, and we really haven't prepared for this. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about the Haworthias and use them as an example for taking divisions or offsets. This is a plant, these are both plants that Art has brought in today, that you can see are very, very pot bound. You can grow them like this as really display specimens, or if you're like me, you can grow them like this, take cuttings annually, and as you know I do, sell them annually at different meetings that I go to. But I'm going to very quickly just take one of these plants and break it apart and show you how quick this can be done.
The tub behind you, or you've got your... Is that dry after your shower this morning?
It's dry after
I have a question in the interim.
Okay.
If you have an emergency where you have to do your propagating in the non-growing season, it'll still work.
Oh, it'll
just
still
take a
work.
long
It's
time.
just going to be a
The
slow
question
process.
was, if you have a plant emergency and you have something that you need to propagate and it's not the growing season, what do you do?
Have a lot of patience, wait several months, and generally by the time the plant is ready to start growing again, the normal plant, it'll also start to root again. But if you, for example, if it's a summer grower, especially with cacti, and you start to take cuttings off of them, say in November or December, or you knock a plant over and the branch breaks off, that happens to all of us. What's cool with so many of the succulents is they're just fine for 3 or 4 months sitting there waiting to be put into a medium.
I just wanted to show you that this is how long it's taken to get 5 rooted pups off of that one plant that we have here today. The original plant is now down to a plant this size, can be accommodated much nicer, much better rather, in the pot that it came from.
Hold it up, Paul.
This was the plant that the original head, the largest head from that particular pot. And I've taken off 5 pups off of that particular plant. All of these of this particular Haworthia, which can all go directly now into the medium and start to grow. They don't need to dry or anything else. These can go right into a medium. Just wanted to give you that demonstration. I'm not going to do the same thing here with this. I could obviously break this thing apart. I'll take a couple of pups off of this and put them in the raffle. This particular, perhaps cuspidata, I'm not sure what Haworthia this is. This one's relatively easy because I suspect I can just pull one out as easy as that. And you can see how something that's this pot bound can be propagated so easily. I'm going to leave that.
And that isn't seasonally. That is, when you do that, it doesn't matter what season it is.
I do this year round.
Growing it almost year round is okay. A lot of the Haworthias are winter growers anyway, so it's easy to do. This is a Haworthia truncata, and it's one of the hard-leaved ones. And I'm moving on to the next one, the leaf cuttings. Leaf cuttings, I've got a number of different things here, but what's cool about the hard-leaved Haworthias like truncata, retusa, and others, if you break off a leaf and get enough of the basal cells with it, let it dry out, put it in either in a just moist soil or whatever, they will root very easily. Problem is it's going to take a couple of years before you get a plant looking like this. But it's kind of cool, it's a lot of fun, I find, doing that. Most of the Haworthias that you get in the market are generally just offsets or divisions like Paul just did, because most of them root very quickly and easily.
I just wanted to do one more offset demonstration because I know the Sansevierias have gotten very, very popular. Art, I was with Art at Longwood Garden this last fall, and Art picked up. Art picked up this little Sansevieria Boncel, I think it's called. And at my recommendation, Art purchased it. It was 3 heads, and now he split it up into 3 different pots.
But this is the pot that it was in. These 3 were in this little pot.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and what's going on to the next or further down, and that's from.
Well, one more
I
offset.
came out of here, and I'll show you in a second what happened.
The club's gotten I think Sansevierias have gotten much more popular with our members. This is Sansevieria that's called Christie. It's across a trifasciata variety called Christie that I've had, came from Bob Ordung at Lancaster Gardens. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to split up a Sansevieria by division. Done. That's all there is to it. And again, I would take this and put it directly into medium. There's nothing to this. I don't bother drying them or anything else. Some people may tell you to do that. The Sansevierias that I propagate, I do usually in the early summer. They're growing very, very vigorously right now. This pup wasn't on this plant about 2 months ago. This is growing up over the winter. And they're very, very, very easy. Nope, if they needed to be pruned, sometimes they might need pruning.
The question was, do you trim the roots?
If it needed to be done to accommodate, if the pot needed it for accommodation, I would do that. Otherwise, I'd put it right in. I'm making the biggest mess up here, too.
Now, I have a question. When you put the parent back into the pot, are you giving it fresh soil, or are you just reusing it?
I'm going to give it what's on the original root ball, and I'm going to use fresh soil. I want to point something out here, too. Look at the new growth. this is going to be breaking through the soil probably in the next week or so. So this, I'm going to talk a little bit about this when we talk about cuttings too.
Mhm. One of the things I found with echeverias is as beautiful as they are, some of them have the tendency to get leggy like this. And this is dormant. And this is one that is one of my favorites. It's carunculated. If you look at the leaves on it, carunculated basically means it has acne. But it's not acne. It's just an aberration. But what happens with this plant is it grows generally on one trunk for the season, and then looks like this during the winter when it's dormant. So what I have done in the past to make it into a show plant is I cut it off. I'm not going to do it now, but just about 1.5 inches, 2 inches down, and just cut it off with a knife or whatever, let it dry off. What will happen is that the stump on it, bottom stump, will now start to throw out new plantlets. So you had one plant, you now get the new plant, plus all of these other guys coming off the stem. And it's really a great way to propagate. So this will really look nice. Maybe I'll try to remember to take it back in May or so, once I've done that, to show how much nicer it'll look in a new pot as it's growing. Yes?
What is the name of that?
This is an Echeveria, I'm sorry, yes, Echeveria gibiflora, or gibiflora, forma carunculata, which, if you're Italian, you know that carunculated means that you've got acne. So that's the acne Echeveria. I love it because it's not just a beautiful plant, but it'll probably get to about twice the diameter on it.
So then do you cut the plantlets off that?
Yep.
And then
They're ready to go
root
this
them
spring.
up?
Yep. And what you do,
Art,
one of the,
what she asked if you, so people know what you're talking
I'm
about.
sorry.
Do you cut those off? What do you do with them now that they're on the old stem?
Actually, I just snapped them off
Okay.
on this plant. It's very, very easy because they're going to start rooting almost immediately once you do the cuttings on them. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, this 10, 12 on there. And leave the stump because they're going to now start it all over again by themselves.
So do you then take the pups
Yep.
and pot them up right
Yep.
away, or do you root them a little bit
The
first?
rule
and
of
then
thumb
pot?
is always, when taking any cuttings of cactus and succulent, is to let them dry off, callus over for
Yeah.
at least a week or so. And so that's what I would do. And generally what I do is I'll just throw them in a container somewhere on the greenhouse bench or in the house and let them callus over. And then when I do plant them in, say, in individual pots, I'll just leave them dry for a week or so. And whatever, there's always some moisture in the soil. They'll start to root on their own, just as this is starting to do.
Okay.
So you can't see them, but the little roots are starting on that. It's a lot of fun and one way to do the propagating. Yes?
I have a question. I have a plant that's done that, and I've just kind of left it alone, but it's looking, the whole plant is looking a little sad right now. Should
Look
I?
at us. It's winter time. We grow plants. So,
I know, but yours looks pretty healthy, you know, in your mind. Will it get better as the better weather comes along?
it depends on what the plant is, but generally a lot of the plants that we grow are not looking so great right now. This is a good example. Yeah, why don't you bring it in next month into the minute clinic and we'll take a look at it. But generally a lot of the plants, my greenhouse, last night I just happened to look at the remote thermometer. My greenhouse is about 50 feet from the house. At 2 o'clock this morning it showed 6 degrees in the greenhouse. So you've never seen anybody dressed so quickly go running out of the icy. We have a lot of ice and snow in New Hampshire. It turned out there was something wrong with the thermometer. But even so, I didn't get much sleep after that. The plants look awful this time of year because my gas bill for the greenhouse is up over $3,000 already. You have to love doing what I do. So therefore, they don't look that great. The temperatures are down to 40, 45 degrees at this time of the year because of the heat issues.
Cuttings?
Cuttings. I did the cutting bit. What I wanted to show also is what they do with grafting. Everyone has seen the lollipops in Walmart, right? Yeah. These are really cool for about a year or two, but the top plant can't grow on its own because it doesn't have any chlorophyll. So what they have to do is they take these little babies off of that and put one of them on the top of a cutting of Hylocereus or other jungle cactus. And it's done generally in places like the Dominican Republic. And what they do is that it's a woman's job because they have more patience than men would have. They get these long, 6-foot-long sections of the Hylocereus, chop them up, making sure that the top is in the right direction, attaching one of these after they bevel it off. They attach it usually with something as simple as women's nylon stocking pieces that will catch on one of the spines. In any case, they ship them to Florida, down to, say, Costa's nursery, and within a couple of months, these start growing exponentially faster than they would if they were rooted anyway, because they're getting the nourishment from the bottom plant. So that's why you get these plants growing like this. The problem is, these only last about a year or two before they dry up, and unless you learn the art of grafting, just as well to chuck it, go out and spend another $4 or $5 on a new one. Questions on that? Yes.
I've always wondered about those things because since I have no chlorophyll. I've always wondered about those grafting things because I have no chlorophyll. If they're grafting them on there, they're seedlings. How do the seedlings survive to be large enough?
They're not seedlings. They're adventitious or just plain offsets. They're living off the mother plant that they came off of. These so-called stalk plants really look awful. They get bigger. But where do they get these? Off of, again, off of another plant that's already thrown off a number of the little offsets.
But then that would mean that there's a mother plant big enough to throw off babies, and how does the mother plant survive?
Mother plant is also grafted because remember, there's no chlorophyll in those.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, somewhere down the line, there's a plant that's surviving to be big enough to be grafted or sprouted.
I haven't met that plant yet.
We had a question on this side. Carol?
Yeah, I have a general question, and I think this is loud enough that you don't have to repeat it. And this is a question that other people may have. When you take an offset, or if you're starting from a cutting that you let dry and start to root, and you put it in dirt, when do you start to water it?
Exactly.
Generally, I wait about a week or so to let the plant get acclimated and also get used to the fact that it's now in a humid environment. And you've got enough of a callus on the plant so that it's not going to rot. One of the things you never want to do with succulents is try to root them in water. It can be done, but you're asking for trouble that after a couple of weeks it starts to rot at the bottom because it's not used to that much water. So you're going to put it into soil, let it stay, if anything, with a little bit of bottom water for a week, 2 weeks or whatever, and then start to water it.
So are you putting it into dry soil or moist soil?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Art, do you put it into dry soil or moist soil?
Generally, it's dry soil or very, very lightly moist, shall we say, not soaking wet. And this proves that you can also be wrong. You had a one-up me, didn't you? But it's got roots on it. However, I've seen these things in the sensitive areas literally growing on 128 in the middle. I mean, they'll grow anywhere. And I've seen them sold in aquarium shops in the bottom of an aquarium with fish floating around them. But come back 6 months later, guaranteed there's not going to be in there. So there.
Another question from the back?
Yeah, I just had a question about the moon cactus that you were showing, the grafted cactus.
Yep.
You said that after a year or so it dries up.
The bottom on it, they don't last.
Mine's growing roots.
You have to wait for her to repeat the
So
question.
the question is the moon cactus, how long do they last?
Yeah.
How long do they last?
Because mine has a root system and it seems to be doing just fine. Why would it dry up? If it
Why would it dry up? I can't answer other than the fact that generally they don't tend to last more than a couple of years. And you'll find at the bottom, or the other way around, the graft on it is not
I was just curious.
viable.
It's got a
any
root
longer.
system. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I think we had another question in the back?
The plant you had in the aquarium, Cactus, there were different varieties of that.
Yes.
That's what, when I bought one of those, and that's when I caught succulent disease. Looking for it after, mine lasted for like 3 or 4 years, cutting it. I saw Echeveria whole bunion, but usually they're in California and it costs more to ship it than to grow it. I had no luck at all trying to propagate it from a leaf.
From a leaf, it's almost impossible, I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
If you look at the, while I was talking before, I was pulling off dead leaves, because they have a tendency, as the plant, right now, it's not growing. It is dormant, but it's dropping the bottom leaves on it. And so I had already picked off a bunch of them a week or so ago. It's not a very pretty plant, when I think, when it's dormant. And they are dormant right now. Once they start growing in the spring, it'll be a lot nicer looking, especially if we've chopped off the top on it. And that it?
Any other questions? Cindy?
Yes.
So I have an aloe twilight zone that the rabbits massacred last summer. And it is starting to send out pups or additional plants. And I tried to propagate it for Paul last year, the year before, to break off some pieces, because they have no roots at all.
Is this, did you say an aloe or an
Aloe. And
okay. Where
so
are they growing? From the base?
no, it comes out from the, well, sort of. It comes out
Because
down
aloes
here.
generally don't throw out stolons.
Maybe that's one for the Minute Clinic?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I meant
Yeah.
to bring it today and I.
Okay.
Any other questions for Art? Because then I understand we have a special guest from the Connecticut Club.
Yeah, if we could ask Cactus Jack to just show us something you brought a show in. This is Cactus Jack Phillips from the Connecticut Club. Cactus Jack spoke with us probably 15, 20 years ago, and he demonstrated something that he's going to demonstrate again. That was quite a wow.
Right. This little tray has 160 holes. If you're in the position that I am where your greenhouse is too crowded, Art has the same problem. You can take and develop, off of a leaf, you develop a micro or pup, put it in one of these. These plants have been in here since '95. There are empty holes, there are empty holes that I've taken out, and they return to a natural size almost immediately.
I
But-
repotted, unfortunately,
Yeah.
been away for a few weeks, and
I
I thought
had-
it would help, and I potted some up.
Yeah, potted a whole bunch up. When I got back in 3 weeks, they were all ruined. They were all starting to run away from themselves. And you can use this with most anything. Now, when you do seed, young lady failed to mention that you always have a variation because no seed is 100% pure today. So if you were to do Rebudias and you wanted red flowers, or you were looking for possibly a yellow flower, and you do 150 or 200 plants, you have to keep them till they mature before you can see what color flower. Here's your answer. Put 100 seeds in here, pull them out 8 or 10 at a time, and push them. I have not the bench space to do everything I want to do, and this is one of the solutions. This is a seed tray, and a 12 by 24 is 512 seeds. So you can put 512 plants in this, and this is the answer. They will survive. This has been here since, well, it was 97 when I came up, and I have them in here. Cuttings like that. I take that cutting, and if I put it in 2-inch pots, you know, you got half the bench full of them, so I just stick them in my shelves, and then leave them there until somebody comes by and give it away. There you go.
Jack, do you have them under lights, or do you keep them on the windowsill?
No, these are just in the greenhouse.
They're under a bench.
Yeah.
I get nothing, no water. No water.
No.
That's what I'm doing, right? I have them under lights with music.
You can put it in here if you want them.
A little factoid. Jack was one of the original founders of the Connecticut Cactus and Succulent Society. What year was it?
Yeah.
And I think you were here at our first meeting, Jack?
Whenever. And if you remember when the Massachusetts Society was talking about becoming a society, they invited a half a dozen of us. So to let you know the problems you're gonna have as you grow.
And this is a problem.
Right, you people are the problem.
He was at the first meeting on November 16th, 1991.
Yep.
Yeah. It's been a while ago.
It's been a while.
Thank you for coming,
Very
Jack.
nice, Jack, very nice.
Quickly, I wanted to show one of the grafting techniques that you'll find. This plant you'll see in Walmart and Home Depot or whatever for 16, 17 bucks, and just sitting there, because they usually cover it over with, I don't know how to describe it, but gravel that's been plasticized, which is awful. And you know what the reason is? So that when it's traveling up from Florida where they do this, that the soil doesn't go all over the place. But I take it off so that it does this. So it's a lot easier for me to see if it's wet or not. But why do they graft? This comes off of a Euphorbia lactea. I have one at home. It was supposed to come, but it's just too big to carry along. But it's a rather large plant. The people that propagate these using the same technique that I talked about before, is they get, in this case, a Euphorbia. They cut one of the oddball ones. One of the oddball ones, I'm sorry. Yeah. They cut the spines off of it, chop it into sections about 6 inches long, put a notch in it, and then they get, from the mother plant, little pieces about the size of that in a V shape, kind of like a pie-shaped piece. Attach them again, whatever method they want to use, and send them from the Dominican Republic probably to the Miami area, Costa Nurseries. And within a month or so, they start to grow exponentially, a lot more quickly. You could take a cutting off that size off of the main plant, and maybe in a couple of years you might get a piece this big. But the way they've cut this, it forms this fan, which is really kind of cool, but it grows very quickly. Probably, I'm just guessing, within 6 months it'll go from that size to this size in 6 months, and it's now marketable, so that's why they use that. Yes?
What's the name of the stock?
The stock, I have not been able to figure that out. One of the reasons is that it's obviously not a really beautiful euphorbia. It's just a big, tall, ugly thing, I would assume. But it's very good for grafting.
Will they survive well?
The bottom one, I've had some of them for years and years. And what a lot of people have a tendency to do, Jack, you've probably done this before, is after a few years, you bury this in the pot, the bottom part of it, and it starts to root out from there. So now all you've got is the top on it. And there was a question on that?
Just the bottom stock, Miles to Go, they use that.
No, no, well,
some of their stuff.
For the euphorbias?
No. The bottom plant.
Yeah.
That stock plant.
Yeah.
Miles to Go uses that.
But he uses Steno cactus on
I've
cacti.
seen 3 different things that they
Right,
use.
but this is the euphorbia.
Okay.
So you can't put a cactus plant on top
Right,
of the
right.
euphorbia.
Understood.
Or the other way around.
Understood.
So in any case, this will probably last for years. It'll grow a lot more quickly. I can segue into what do they call it, the tissue culture. These plants were tissue cultured, as tissue culture is something you can't do at home. You need a lab to do it. And what they do basically is they take, depending on the plant, whether it's pieces of the root or the stem or whatever, take a couple of cells, I'm talking a little tiny piece of cell, put it in a lab, and within 3 months, for example, with orchids, you'll get maybe a couple of thousand plants out of that one, because each cell is now going to be a clone of the mother plant. So when I bought this, these were, last November, were all 3 in this little tiny pot. And this is what has happened just in 3 months. And so they grow exponentially a lot more quickly, but from that one little group of cells in a lab, this is what they've ended up with. One of probably thousands of plants from one little cutting. So that's the reason why they do the tissue culture. And do I have time? How much more time?
I've still got some things to say too.
Okay. This is an Echeveria runyoni, otherwise known as topsy-turvy. And this is the normal plant with the topsy-turvy leaves on it. These will be cut off and become cuttings very quickly. The ones that are not, what's the term I'm looking for now? They're not, Jack, help me.
Shoots.
Huh? No, the top part is turned into not coming, it's a crest, thank you. What happens when you have 2 hours? When you have 2 hours of sleep at night, yeah. I do that. In any case, this is going to be a nice plant eventually, the top of it. So I'll take off all of these reverted plants on the edges, and it'll look kind of cool. This is a Focaria tuberculosa, which is otherwise known as the tiger teeth plant or tiger's jaws. And it's a summer grower, but it's really looking awful this year. So what I'm going to do with this plant, it's a mess, beautiful flowers, white flowers in the summer, is cut these up because obviously the roots must either be suffering or rotting or whatever, and end up making probably 6, 7, 8 cuttings. They'll go into individual pots, and they'll look really cool in a couple of months. So
And again, on those, you'll let them callus and then put them in?
Yep. So they have to callus first, that's the one trick.
Mark, can you just turn around and show us what plant you have?
I'm sorry. If we stood up front, you wouldn't be able to see them, so.
Okay.
But, and generally I pass them around, but I want them back, so. Okay. And these, again, are dormant. One of the other things I think is cool, there's stolons. And stolons down there, if you could point, Paul, to the one that's right in front of Rick Ebbs. That fell apart coming here today.
Okay. Well, this
You've
is,
got the same thing.
I brought a stoloniferous plant. You can see it, there's the beginning, there's the beginning of a root even on this little pup that's coming off the side here. And at any point now, that could be cut off and planted. Again, I didn't mention before, when it comes to cuttings like this, you want to have something that's beginning to look like the parent plant. We learned this with the bromeliads particularly. You don't cut the pup off the minute it breaks the soil. Rather, you let it take on some of the form of the parent plant. Art has, unfortunately, it's broken apart, but Art has taken a stoloniferous plant, and he had it growing in, I think, 4 different pots.
Yeah.
As the stolon would go out, he'd let it drop the roots down into a pot, and he called it what, the choo-choo train. And he had this series of plants that were growing. You can start it again, Art, with this.
I think Cindy had a question?
I did. On this stoloniferous plants.
Wow, very good.
When the root starts coming down, you said that's when you would pot it up.
If you chose to.
Okay, but, yes. Can you hold it up again?
Sure.
For me, please? All right. So let's say that you would cut it here.
Yeah, anywhere along the
So
way.
what would you do with this?
I would cut it off.
Okay,
I would cut it off.
thanks.
I've not seen kikis form on a stolon like that. Perhaps they do. I've not seen it happen.
Okay, and can you turn it around so the people behind you
Oh,
can see?
of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question is, so you were saying that, I forget already which one it was looking kind of bad and you want to rescue it, because maybe, is that a good thing? Like when things start looking like they're dying, is there waterlogged, is it?
Yeah, well,
It's
you've got
propagation,
thousands.
the way to save a dying plant.
Yeah, how do you rescue a dying plant? Depends on the plant itself. When you've got 4,000 of them or so in your greenhouse, you tend to find a few of them that have been neglected, and that was one of them. And I'd like to save that because it is a very pretty plant. And if I can rejuvenate it, that's a lot of fun.
So you just dig it out and cut off the roots?
Yeah. And probably trim it back, put it in new soil, and it should look pretty nice by this time the summer comes. Again, that's the other thing, is trying to determine when is the growing season of these plants, because a lot of the things you want to do to them, you don't want to do, whether it's to propagate or just to prune them or whatever, you don't want to do it when they're dormant, generally, as a rule of thumb. This was a gasteria leaf that broke off, and guess what? This is a larger version of it. but this broke off last year, and you see the babies coming up. It's really cool.
Can I follow up with you on that?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share something too. We're talking again about Sansevierias, and this little Sansevieria was a leaf cutting, and you will see the original leaf here down into the soil, and this is probably about 4 years. 4 years later, here's the plant that's been started off of this particular leaf. We also have on the auction table today a donation of a similar plant, another Sansevieria. In this case, this was the leaf that was placed down in the soil. We saw them in water before. You can also put these directly into medium, and they'll most likely root directly into the medium. And what's happened from this, now you see the plant coming up. At any point, you can remove this. If you want, you could cut this off and start it all over again.
Paul, does the size of the parent, the starter leaf, does it impact the size of the...
Thank you, and this is a show and tell. Yeah.
Sorry. The Sansevierias, they don't always come true, though.
This is so important, and here's a demonstration. I have just the plant to show you.
The question was, do Sansevierias go true from leaf cuttings?
When Terry Donsker passed away, we visited the house, and one of the things I brought home was this pot, her pot, with this beautiful leaf in it. It's starting to die back now. This beautiful, beautiful leaf. Who wouldn't want that Sansevieria in their collection? Now, a couple of years later, look what's happened. It's reverted. This is what happens with the trifasciata varieties. They're extremely fickle. And that's why when you get something like this, and you have this particular pup come off of it, it's almost unique. If it's a trifasciata in its parentage, they will usually revert back to that particular plant. If it's a species Sansevieria, it will be true. Then it'll be true. But if it's one of these, if it's the trifasciatas, you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah.
I know for African violets, there's certain like variegated varieties and stuff that won't come true from a leaf. But if you pluck out an offset in between the leaves, that will root and give you the original that you're looking for.
So are offsets usually true, but it's the leaf cuttings that might not be
It's the leaf cuttings. The offsets will be true. You'll see what you've got. That's not true. That's not what happened here. You don't know. With the trifasciata varieties, you cannot count on the progeny being true. I wanted to do one more quick demonstration. On this beautiful Christie plant, there's one bad leaf. Now, what can I do with this leaf? You saw it over there that you could put this right into a medium. You could put this right into I might dry it for a day or two, put it into sand, put it into some sort of a medium, and perhaps, like you saw with this particular plant, I will get something that's true or not true, but I'll get another plant. But I could also
He's slicing the leaf.
cut these pieces off and root these. Again, dry these, and you'll see what you've seen with this particular plant. You could start growing it like this particular plant. However, you've got to remember something. These have to go down. These have to go in the growth pattern. Now, you see this a month later. What was the growth pattern? You see, you can do a couple of things. You can put a very sharp angle. This is the tip. But you can put a very sharp angle that means down, or something that I've done for a long time. The magic marker, you're going to say down. Remember.
Unless you forget and you're looking at it, gee, that means up, right?
The point always means down.
To you.
Is that related back to
Nope, this can be mixed up like this. But you see the process. You just don't know what you're going to get. I wouldn't speak ill of Bob Smoley, the merchant who used to sell at the Connecticut show. But Bob, in his catalog, listed about, I don't know, 150 different Sansevieras. And there was no way. He would make up a name for any individual sport that came his way. You know this. Yeah.
What do you want it to be?
I've got, this would be Sansevieria Cactus Jack if you wanted it to be.
They sell you anything you want it. You don't know what you're gonna get, but he's going to.
Thanks.
All right, do you have any more questions, or do you have more to share?
I just have a couple more. I just wanted to show. One of the things that, there was an article in the Globe a while back about me, when and one of the things mentioned is I have no problem with picking up leaf cuttings off the floor in Home Depot and places like that. Yep, and this is some of them, and this is some of them, and this is some of them. And guess what? I mean, they're only going to get stepped on or swept out. That's if you get there before the people that work at these places, no, destroy them anyway. Because obviously, orchids go right next to the doors that are opening at this time of the year, so they freeze. But then they bring in all the spring shrubs and bring them inside in February so they can start growing and spindly. So in any case, I rescue them and give them out to friends. But so this is Ripsaladopsis, which should look kind of cute in a while. But also, these are leaves of a kalanchoe that's called, I've never seen it before, it's called elkhorn. And that was one of the leaves on the ground, and that's what it's looking like now. So it should have a nice little plant soon. Just the same way that they, I'll say it in a second, Crassula falcata, which is really cool. It's sickle-shaped leaves on it. Break the leaf off of this, let it dry off, and you'll get a new leaf. Cut it into 5 sections, you'll get 5 new plants out of it. But the last one that I wanted to talk about was, and I don't have a large Opuntia pad. This is an Opuntia unnamed. It's a hardy one. It's been in my greenhouse, but otherwise it's quite hardy here. If you have any of the Opuntia humifusas, if you're familiar with that, the hardy prickly pear cactus, there's a cool way of propagating these. If you've got a leaf about this big, or pad, cut it up into pie-shaped segments. Each one of those little dimples on there, I won't touch them, will become a new plant once it's dried off. So if you have a large clump of the cacti, of the Opuntias, and you want to give it out to friends or whatever, cut it up in the springtime right now. Let it dry off. Just lay them on the top of the ground, and you'll have a new plant for every little chunk that you chopped up. That it?
That's it. Okay, we've got a short intermission. Oh, one question, sorry.
What about propagating from roots?
From roots? I haven't tried that.
You can go for orchids, you can propagate from roots.
Yes, but I didn't do that one mainly because I don't have any that I could show. Any other questions? Yes.
So, what about the orchids that quote lose their roots, and they do? You've got a plant and it won't reroot. You've got roots in there like.
I would
usually
take
goes into the trash.
I would take, and this happens all the time, orchids lose their roots and you think that the plant is going to die. I would take it away from the pot, I would let it dry, I would put it on dry medium, and just let it sit there for a couple of weeks, gradually start to mist it, and it will usually, particularly if it's coming into growth, it'll set down new roots. They'll come back most of the time.
Thank you.
It happens to all of us.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to do a quick intermission while we get ready for the nomenclature presentation.
Of Latin today. Mammillaria, Astrophytum, Gasteria, and one of the questions that comes up, especially for people who are new, is what's with all this foreign language and stuff. And so I'm going to try to clarify it today. It's not as hard as it seems. It can be a lot of fun, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And the whole idea is for you not to be afraid when you see a Latin name there, because you already do speak a lot of Latin. Maybe not realizing it, but when we do say geranium, you're speaking Latin. So I'm going to put a few slides up here and walk through it, and partway through we're going to stop and have a little quiz. And what you have to do is translate the Latin that's up on the screen. All right, so there'll be a Latin phrase up there, and the first one who yells out the answer to it gets applause from everybody else. That's it. This is a cheap outfit. So we're going to go through here and talk about what's in the name. Can we turn off the center lights there? It's one of those two switches, so we'll take a shot at it. There we go. Okay, a little bit better there. So what's in the name? Pretty much everything. You know that. And I'm going to put some examples up here. I'm going to start with animals because this is what we're most familiar with, and then we'll work into plants. See if we build up to understanding this. So what's the name of this critter? Leopard. Who said a leopard? So it's familiar. It's most of us probably agree it's a cat. Mountain lion, but it depends on which part of the United States you live in, because some place like Florida, it's a panther. No, it's not a bobcat. Although you're really driving home the point why we need Latin names. Cougar, but out in California apparently refers to women of a certain age. Puma, I guess that's the sneaker company took that name. Painter, where do they call this thing a painter? It's in the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, you go out there, and they'll have no idea what you're talking about. If it was a cougar.
I'd say panther.
Yeah, could be. Catamount, go up to Vermont. That's where you're going to find catamounts, but they don't have any idea what a painter is or any of these other things here. So years ago, Carolus Linnaeus, you've all heard the name, remember high school biology? Yes. Who was not from Rome, he wasn't Italian, he was Polish. He was Swedish. You see, I'm learning stuff here too. Are you sure about that? Speaking as a Swede? Well, what was his Swedish name? There you go. Okay, well, that guy. So we need a system that everybody understands, and at the time, I can verify this. At the time, he was asking God for information, how would you come up with a name? And I said, how about a dead language that doesn't evolve, doesn't change, and educated people all speak Latin? And so they picked that as the language, and they came up with this name for this guy. And all the names that we're going to talk about, I'll go over the rules, consist of two parts. The first part, Felis, that's the generic name, the genus name, and the second part is the specific name or the species name. And they always, when you do it, it always has to be in italics, not Swedish. And the genus name always begins with, Nevi's thumbing his nose at me. The genus name, the generic name always begins with an F. I mean with a capital, and the species name never begins with a capital letter. And this comes from classification. Remember high school, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? The last two become the name of the critter. So in this case, Felis concolor, and it's Latin, but we all know this means cat. And we know feline, sure, and con is Spanish, with color, cat with color. The implication was it was a cat with one color, tan. But that's the problem with some of this naming system. The implication is in there, and some people imply one thing, other people imply another thing. But this is a good example. Here's another one that we should classify. All right, now, you've heard of the abominable snowman. Now, some people refer to this creature as Artie. One poor person refers to him as deer. The Boston Globe refers to him as Cactus King. Vice President and say President Emeritus, he's the president of this group forever and ever. Oh, we need a name because anybody could be vice president. I think we have one in Washington. Artie, some supermarket guy named Artie, go away, right? Lots of us are dead. So the name in Latin then becomes Scarpus Arcturus. So you can see how easy this system is. So don't be afraid of the plant name. It's just like Artie. You get used to it after a while. So, who makes the rules? Well, for animals, we have this group. This is half the group. But I couldn't put all the pictures up there. It would have covered up too much of the screen. And this is the International Commission for Zoological Nomenclature, ICZN. And you'll see these folks, he's in charge of beetles. These folks have specialties. He's in charge of birds. This guy's in charge of bugs. By bugs, what do we mean? Well, they mean true bugs. Not to be confused with insects and so forth. You can't see down here, but this is the only lady. There are 3 altogether in this commission out of 24 members. There are 3. And she's in charge of protozoans, which aren't animals. Right? So you could get into some arguments with some biologists over which is which, but they didn't know where to put protozoans, so they threw them in with animals like that. And so these guys are in charge of giving the official names to animals. And for plants, there is no standing group. There is a botanical congress, just like the Continental Congress that came together for a while and then dissolved. These guys come together about every 6 years. And this is the group. There's a lot more women in this group than the plants. These are the people who put out the word, we're going to meet in, say, Schenectady 6 years from now to go over new plant names. They make the rules. Now, when our good Swedish friend, Carlos, was that his name? There you go. When he came up with his rules, he said, not only does it have to be Latin, the name should be descriptive, describe the creature. Felis con color, right? A cat with color. Describe the creature. It is also identified. No, the cats can be called Felis con color, only the mountain lion. So that a guy in China, a guy in Australia, and a guy from Mexico sitting together at a bar talking about the giant cat that just ate a Pekingese out in the parking lot, it might not be Felis con color. Sorry, Sarah. Sarah just adopted 2 peaks. They have 2 naming systems. The International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. This includes all of our cacti and succulents, but also there's algae in there and there's fungus, and we all know that fungi are not plants. Algae are not plants, unless you talk to certain people who say, yes, they are plants. But they had to put them somewhere, so they're in there. And then for the cultivars, the cultivated plants, there's another naming system, the ICNCP. So, genus name, again, down to plants now, Carnegie, and a species name, an example, Gigantea. So you put them together, and you have Carnegie gigantea. So quiz number 1, what plant is this? Saguaro. All right, everybody knows it is a saguaro plant. And you say, okay, is this descriptive? Well, no. Carol says no.
Gigantea is, but Carnegie is not.
Yeah, what's the Carnegie business?
Named after Carnegie.
Yeah, why him?
Because he had a lot of money.
And what did he do with it? What he did was, this is a guy, Andrew, set up a foundation. The foundation established the Desert Botanical Gardens in Phoenix. They put the money up for it, it's original money, so they named the plant after the guy. So we're getting away from description now, right? We're getting to whatever, people in this case, rich people. So here we have them side by side. Paul?
Question.
Question where? Oh, question, Sarah.
Isn't the guy name usually the second name? Like Wildflower Oxia or Fuchsia or whatever?
Where do we get into it? Whoa. Did you move this off? Good. All right, so let's see if we figured it out. Yep, okay. Carnegie, Gigantea, and Scarpus Arcturus. So it's pretty easy. And with the Latin, if I say I'm going out looking for Scarpus Arcturus, now you know I'm not looking for the plant, I'm looking for the guy. And I'm looking for that guy. I'm not looking for Carnegie, somebody else. There are some other problems too. The mountain lion, we have 6 different names for the same creature. Here we have 209 different cacti, all with the same name. Hedgehog. Some of them look alike, some of them look different. I didn't put them all up there, but you go online, you find these. So this is a problem, right? So when people come in here and they have a plant and hold it up and say, what's this? Just say hedgehog. That'll cover it. We already know some scientific names, right? Agave, Sansevieria, aloe. So it's not a foreign language, it's a language we already speak. Wisdom. All right? So what you have to do is translate that name. So I'm going to put a picture of a plant and its Latin name, and I want you, whoever, don't be shy, just yell out what it means in English. Translate it. We'll start off with the easy ones. Okay, there's only about 6 of them, so don't worry. All right, Haworthia truncata, what's it mean in English?
Menorah.
Menorah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait a minute. Paul?
Named for Haworth, who discovered it.
Yes, so this is a guy's name. What's that? Truncated Haworthia. What's it mean? Yeah, just cut off, that's all. Truncated. So that was easy, right? So if you're ever confused at Lowe's or something, just say the name backwards and you got it. Okay, number 2. Euphorbia obesa. All right. I can't hear you. Anybody yell out?
It's obese.
What's obese? Yeah, it's obese euphorbia. You see, it's easy. You already speak Latin, you don't even know it. This is interesting. The obese part, no problem, right? Look at that thing. But euphorbia, where does that come from? Anybody know?
Greek.
Greek. It was a Greek physician, or if you look at another dictionary, he was a Greek warrior who fought at Troy, and he had golden flakes in his hair. And that's where the name comes from there. Now, if you're ever curious about this stuff, there's a website called Dave's Garden. I love it. Yeah, just go to Dave's Garden, and in that he has what he calls a botanary. And you just type in any name and you get the information. Well, that's an easy way if you don't know. All right, Sansevieria cylindrica.
Mount Sansevieria.
Paul way out and out. Pretty good. Let's see. A cylinder like Sansevieria. So the cylinder part's easy. They look like cylinders, right? What's that? He was a Spanish count of the province of Sansevieria. And he was like Carnegie. He gave a lot of money to explorers, so he gets his name up there too. Gasteria brevifolia. Short leaf. Well, what's Gasteria mean? Stomach. Stomach, yes, yes, yes. Stomach with sharp leaves. All right. Yeah, so apparently the flower reminded a person, man, that looks like a stomach, man. Right? You have to picture these botanists. They've been out for 6 months in the desert looking for plants. They found a little peyote over here. And whoa, look at that, whoa! That definitely looks like a stomach to me. And you got this name. Kind of serious grandiflora. Translate, yell it out. Everybody got big flower. All right. Yeah, a kino means spiny, right? Urchin. Well, hedgehog and urchin. Spiny torch with a large flower. Serious? Are you serious? Can mean a torch, can mean a candle, can mean a column, it depends, right? And so here we have this name, a kino means spiny or hedgehog-like. Echinopsis, subdenudata. So you look at this, you go, okay, this begins with, okay, this must be spiny. And for people from Athens, you know, opsis means similar to, alike. All right, and whatever that means. Anybody want to take a chance on it? Yeah, looking like a teeth. When I look here, I'm kind of seeing teeth. When I look here, I'm kind of seeing nude. Of course. What does that plant look like? It looks like a partially naked cigarette tree. And that's the translation. So if you don't know what it means, don't worry about it. Just make something up. As close as these guys ever got. Now is a reference. This cheat sheet is not from Dave's, but I just printed out to show it to you there. There are many of them. But Dave's Garden is a good place, a really good place to go to. At the last conference, which was in Beijing, I think it was in 2017, they changed the rules for naming. They change them all the time, but they really made a big change. And the big change was the names no longer have to be descriptive. They no longer have to be Latin. They can be Latinized, and they can be old-fashioned, where the adjective reflects the noun and the tense and gender and all. Who cares about that stuff? All right? They pretty much said all you need is a name, has to have 2 parts, a genus and species, that IDs the plant, IDs the animal. That was kind of a big mistake to do that, because that let everybody free to come up with some pretty clever names, which we're gonna look at. Some names to ponder, and we'll stop at the last one, and then we'll be all done here, because these will require some serious thinking on the way home. I don't want you to forget them. So here's a couple. The first one, camera lens. These are real names. Camera lens. Abracadabra. This is one of those people, you saw all the faces up there, one of them was in charge of fossils. Abracadabra is the name of an extinct clam. All right, so this guy, I had to look this guy up. He was a Polish guy who hated the Russians. And he was out by Lake Baikal, and he found a tiny shrimp. And he decided to make the longest word possible for a tiny shrimp. And it kind of means a member of the gamma group has a crispy outside on his skin, and he's found in Lake Baikal. That's what, if you translate that. Cyclocephala. Not another one. This guy, I keep saying guys, there are some women, but mostly it's the guys, you know, like Jack Daniels and the others who are out there. working in the hot sun. He was looking for other kinds of insects, but he kept finding new scarab beetles. And he got sick of it. And so this was the last this is a fly. South American fly. There's also pizzeria. There's also pièce de résistance. Those are two other kinds of flies. Getting to plants, heebie-jeebie is one of my favorites. Similar to hens and chicks, but this has a cooler name. Heebie-jeebie. Lobelia syphilitica. Oh, I'm sure there are a few of them. People were looking for the cure. They said, this is the plant that's going to cure it.
I'll kill you.
Yeah, I'll kill you, one or the other. Ariocarpus confusus. Translation, the confusing Ariocarpus. Why? This Ariocarpus, this cactus, grows in a valley between two other species of Ariocarpus. And they couldn't decide if it was more that one or that one. They were confused about it, so they said, let's split the difference. And they called it Ariocarpus confusus. Mammillaria gigantea. Mammillaria means breast. And these guys thought, look at that, look at those boobs. And so it became Mammillaria gigantea. There are a whole bunch of others I cannot put up here because we have children. Go ahead, say it out loud.
Kleinia, named after Gordon Rowley. And on the internet a while back, the Kleinia rowleyanus, where somebody had asked why they would name a plant after this poor guy's anus. He was serious, and this got all over the internet on Cacti, etc. many years ago.
Yeah, there are many of them. There's another one, there's another particularly attractive fly that has a very large, well-shaped rear end, and its specific name is Beyonce. And there are many others I really can't say, so we'll finish with Latin Fini, that's it. Anybody have any questions on nomenclature? Carol!
Yes, and there's a famous plant that went in the Cactus and Succulent window about 10 years ago, named by Glenn Lord, Awerthia halifino.
Paul!
And anybody who knew Roger Logie died last year from the Logie family. Around New England. Roger Logie would look you straight in the face, and if he didn't know the name of the plant, without hesitation, he would say, why, that's Americanus diamifino.
And with full transparency, I invented a plant in the show for many, many years called Mammillaria vaneskii, judge shows. I named it for the guy who lives across the street from me. I had no idea, I still don't know what this plant is. And it's done very well at the show. With that, we're going to go on to our raffle and auction. Okay?